"You're cold," the boy whispered, covering the sleeping billionaire with his only jacket while $5,000 sat inches away, untouched. What happened next shattered everything a dying man believed about the world. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Victor Larson wasn't asleep. His eyes were shut, his breathing slow and heavy, slumped deep in his leather chair like a tired old man drifting off. But Victor wasn't resting. He was watching. At 75, Victor was one of the wealthiest men in Washington, D.C. hotels. Real estate. Investments that could buy city blocks. He had everything money could touch, except the one thing it couldn't buy. Trust. His own kids only showed up to talk about the will. His business partners smiled while sharpening their knives behind his back. Even his staff had stolen from him watches, cash, expensive wine. Victor had learned the hard way. People are greedy. Every single one of them. And today? He was about to prove it again. Outside, a storm hammered the city. Rain slapped the windows, thunder rolled low, and wind howled through the trees. Inside his library, a fire crackled warm. On the small table next to his chair sat an open envelope stuffed with $100 bills. $5,000. Just sitting there like he'd forgotten about it. But Victor hadn't forgotten anything. He was waiting. The door opened. Sarah, his maid, walked in. She'd only worked for him 3 weeks, but Victor knew her whole story. 28. Widowed 2 years ago when her husband died in a factory accident. Left with nothing but bills and a 7-year-old son named Jason. Today the schools were closed because of the storm. Sarah couldn't afford a babysitter. She'd begged to bring Jason to work, swearing he'd be silent. The housekeeper warned her, "If Victor even sees the boy, you're both fired." Victor heard 2 sets of footsteps. Sarah's anxious shuffle. And smaller, lighter steps behind her. "Stay here, Jason," Sarah whispered, voice trembling. "Sit on that rug. Don't move. Don't touch anything. Mr. Larson's sleeping. If you wake him, Mommy loses her job and we won't have anywhere to sleep tonight. Understand?" "Yes, Mama." The boy's voice was so small. So scared. "I'll be back in 10 minutes. Please be good." "I promise." The door clicked shut. Now it was just Victor and the boy. Silence. Just the fire crackling, rain pounding glass, and the grandfather clock ticking away. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. Victor kept his breathing steady, listening through the cracks of his eyelids. He figured the kid would get curious. Maybe knock something over. Poor kids were hungry, for everything they didn't have. But Jason didn't move. 5 minutes passed. Victor's neck cramped, but he didn't break character. Then, finally, he heard it. The soft rustle of fabric. The boy was standing. Victor's pulse kicked. Here we go. The little thief's making his move. Small footsteps. Coming closer. Jason was walking toward him. Victor knew what the boy was looking at. The envelope. $5,000, barely a foot away. He played it out in his head. Jason grabs the cash, shoves it in his pocket. Victor opens his eyes and catches him red-handed. Another lesson learned. The footsteps stopped. Jason was right beside him. Victor waited for the sound of paper rustling. 4 greedy little fingers snatching what wasn't theirs. But it never came. Instead, Victor felt something he didn't expect. A small, cold hand touching his arm. So gentle it was barely there. Victor's heart stopped. What is he doing? The boy pulled back. Then Victor heard a zipper. Jason was taking off his jacket. Then Victor felt it. Something warm draped over his legs. The boy's jacket. Thin, damp from rain, spread over Victor's knees like a blanket. Jason whispered, "You're cold. Mama says old people get sick when they're cold." Victor's body went rigid. His mind went blank. Jason wasn't looking at the money. He was looking at him. Then Victor heard movement on the table. The envelope. Here it is, Victor thought. Now he takes it. But the money didn't move. Victor cracked his eye open just enough to see. Jason, scrawny, shivering, wearing shoes with holes, was pushing the envelope back from the edge so it wouldn't fall. Then he picked up a notebook that had slipped to the floor, dusted it off, and placed it safely on the table. "Safe now," Jason whispered. Then he walked back to his corner, sat down, pulled his knees to his chest, and wrapped his arms around himself. Shivering. He'd given his only jacket to a stranger. And now he was cold. Victor lay there, frozen. For the first time in 20 years, he had no idea what to think. He'd set a trap for a thief. But he'd caught an angel instead. The stone wall around his heart cracked. Just enough to let the light in. Why didn't he take it? They're poor. I know they're poor. Why didn't he take the money? Before Victor could process it, the door burst open. Sarah ran in, breathless, face white as a sheet. She saw Jason shivering without his jacket. Then she saw that jacket draped across the billionaire's legs. She saw the money on the table. Her hands flew to her mouth. And that's when everything fell apart. Sarah thought the worst. She thought Jason had ruined everything. And Victor? He just lay there, pretending to sleep, watching a mother fall apart, because of a game he started. Jason! Sarah hissed, grabbing her son by the arm and yanking him up from the rug. Her voice cracked with panic. "What did you do? Why is your jacket on him? Did you touch that money?" "No, Mama," Jason said, eyes wide and terrified. He looked cold. "I just wanted to help." "Oh God. Oh God." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the jacket, trying to pull it off Victor's legs without waking him. Tears pooled in her eyes. "He's going to fire us, baby. We're done. I told you not to move." Victor felt her fear like heat radiating off a stove. She wasn't scared of a monster. She was scared of him. Scared of losing the one thing keeping a roof over their heads. And for the first time in years, Victor felt something he thought he'd buried forever. Shame. Sarah finally got the jacket off and clutched it to her chest like evidence she needed to hide. She grabbed Jason's hand and started pulling him toward the door, whispering frantic apologies to the sleeping man even though she thought he couldn't hear. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Larson. Please don't wake up. Please." But Victor couldn't keep up the act anymore. He opened his eyes. Sarah froze mid-step. Her face went from pale to gray. Jason looked up at the old man, confused, his little hand still wrapped in his mother's. "Sarah," Victor said, his voice rough. He sat up slowly, adjusting himself in the chair. "Stop." "Mr. Larson, I'm so sorry," Sarah stammered, tears now streaming down her face. "He didn't mean anything. He's just a kid. Please, I need this job. I'll pay for the chair if he ruined it, I swear." "The chair's fine," Victor said flatly. Sarah blinked. "But the jacket, he put his dirty jacket on your—" "I know what he did." Victor's eyes shifted to Jason, who was staring at the floor now, shoulders hunched like he was waiting for a blow. "I was awake the whole time." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Sarah's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked from Victor to Jason and back again, her brain struggling to catch up. "You were awake," she finally whispered. "Every second." Victor leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "I wanted to see what your boy would do. I left that money out on purpose. Wanted to see if he'd take it." Sarah's knees almost buckled. "You were testing us?" Victor didn't answer. He just kept his eyes on Jason, who still wouldn't look up. "And—" Sarah's voice was barely audible now. Did he pass?" Victor didn't smile. Didn't soften. But something in his chest felt different. Lighter. Like a weight he didn't know he was carrying had shifted just an inch. "He didn't touch the money," Victor said quietly. Sarah exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. "But that's not what surprised me." Victor stood up slowly, his joints aching. He walked over to the table and picked up the envelope, holding it in his wrinkled hands. Then he looked down at Jason, who was now peeking up at him with wide, nervous eyes. "You covered me with your jacket," Victor said. "Why?" Jason's voice came out small. "You looked cold." "And the money?" "You pushed it back so it wouldn't fall." "I didn't want it to get lost." Victor stared at the boy for a long moment. Then he set the envelope back down and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. You can go, Sarah, he said without turning around. Take the rest of the day off. Paid. Sarah stood there, stunned, unsure if she'd heard him right. Mr. Larson? Go home. Both of you. Sarah grabbed Jason's hand and hurried toward the door before he could change his mind. But just as she reached for the handle, Victor spoke again. Sarah. She turned, heart pounding. Bring him back next Saturday. Her breath caught. Sir. Victor finally looked at her. His face was unreadable. I want to talk to the boy. All week, Sarah couldn't sleep. She replayed that moment in the library over and over in her mind, trying to figure out what it meant. Bring him back next Saturday. The words haunted her. Was it a test? Was Victor planning something? Was he going to humiliate them? She thought about quitting. Thought about taking Jason and disappearing before Saturday came. But she couldn't. She needed the money. Needed the job. So she showed up that Saturday morning with Jason by her side, both of them quiet as church mice. Mrs. Higgins met them at the door, her face tight. Mr. Larson's waiting for you in the library. Sarah's stomach dropped. She squeezed Jason's hand. It's okay, baby. Just be polite. They walked down the long hallway, footsteps echoing on the marble floors. When they reached the library, the door was already open. Victor sat in the same chair, hands folded in his lap, staring at the fire. Come in, he said without looking. Sarah stepped inside, Jason clinging to her side. The storm from last week was gone, but the air still felt heavy. Victor turned his head slowly, his eyes landing on Jason. Sit down, boy. Jason looked up at his mom. She nodded, and he walked over to the chair across from Victor, sitting on the edge like he might need to run. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small object. He placed it on the table between them. It was a toy car. Old. Beat up. One of the wheels was missing. Jason's eyes went wide. That's mine, he whispered. I know, Victor said. You dropped it last week when your mother pulled you out of here. I found it after you left. Jason reached for it, but Victor's hand shot out, stopping him. Not yet. Jason pulled back, confused. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me about this car. Jason's voice was barely a whisper. My dad gave it to me. Before he died. And it means something to you. It's all I have left of him. Victor nodded slowly. Then he picked up the car and held it in his palm, studying it like it was made of gold. You know what I have, boy? I have mansions. I have cars worth more than most people's houses. I have investments that make money while I sleep. He looked Jason dead in the eyes. But I don't have this. Jason frowned. A toy car. Something that means more than what it's worth. The room went quiet except for the crackling fire. Victor set the car down and leaned back. Last week, you had a chance to take $5,000. You didn't. Why? Because it wasn't mine. But you're poor, aren't you? Jason flinched. Sarah stepped forward. Mr. Larson, please. Victor raised a hand, silencing her. His eyes never left Jason. Answer the question, boy. You're poor, aren't you? Jason's lip trembled. Yes, sir. And $5,000 would change your life. Yes, sir. So why didn't you take it? Jason looked down at his hands. Because Mama says stealing is wrong. She says God sees everything, even when people don't. And I don't want God to think I'm bad. Victor's jaw tightened. He sat back, silent. Sarah could feel the tension in the room like a living thing. She didn't know what Victor was trying to do, but it felt like he was peeling back layers of something buried deep. Finally, Victor spoke. You put your jacket on me because you thought I was cold. Yes, sir. Even though you were cold too. Jason nodded. Victor picked up the toy car again and turned it over in his hands. Then, without warning, he stood and walked to the window, his back to them. I've spent my whole life believing people are selfish, Victor said, his voice low. That everyone's got an angle. That kindness is just a trick people use to get what they want. He paused. And then you walked into my house and proved me wrong. Sarah's heart pounded. She had no idea where this was going. Victor turned around, his face hard but his eyes different. Softer. I want to make you an offer. If you've ever doubted whether goodness still exists in this world, hold on to this moment. Because what happens next isn't just about a billionaire and a boy. It's about all of us. It's about whether we still believe people can surprise us. If this story is hitting you somewhere deep, don't walk away. There's more truth coming, and you need to hear it. An offer. Sarah's voice cracked. What kind of offer? Victor walked back to his chair and sat down heavily, like the weight of his years was suddenly pressing on him. He looked at Jason, then at Sarah. I want to hire the boy. Sarah's mouth fell open. Hire him? He's 7 years old. I know how old he is. Victor's tone was sharp, but not cruel. I'm not asking him to work construction. I'm asking him to come here. Every Saturday. Spend time with me. Spend time. Sarah repeated, like the words didn't make sense. Why? Victor's eyes shifted to the fire. Because I need to understand something. I need to see if what happened last week was real or if it was just a fluke. He looked back at Jason. I need to see if you're really as good as you seem, boy. Or if you're just playing a long game. Sarah's protective instincts flared. He's a child, Mr. Larson. He's not playing any game. Everyone's playing a game, Sarah. Some people just hide it better. Victor's voice was cold again, but there was a crack in it now. A hairline fracture in the armor. I'll pay you $200 every Saturday. Cash. Just for him spending a few hours here with me. $200. That was more than Sarah made in 3 days of scrubbing floors and washing dishes. She wanted to say no. Wanted to grab Jason and run. But she couldn't. That money would mean groceries. Would mean keeping the lights on. Would mean Jason wouldn't have to wear shoes with holes in them anymore. What would he have to do? Sarah asked carefully. Nothing. Victor leaned back. Just sit. Talk. Be himself. That's it. Jason looked up at his mom, confused. Mama. Sarah knelt down and put her hands on his shoulders. Baby, do you want to do this? Jason looked at Victor, then back at his mom. Will it help you? Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. Yes. It would help a lot. Jason nodded. Then I'll do it. Victor watched the exchange, his face unreadable. But inside, something was happening. Something he hadn't felt in decades. Curiosity. Not the cold, calculating curiosity of a businessman. But the kind a person feels when they see something beautiful they don't understand. Like watching a sunrise and wondering how light can break through darkness so perfectly. Good, Victor said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp stack of bills, handing them to Sarah. That's for today. He starts now. Sarah took the money with shaking hands. Mr. Larson, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just leave us. Sarah hesitated. Every motherly instinct screamed at her not to leave her son alone with this man. But something in Victor's eyes told her Jason would be safe. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't kindness. But it wasn't cruelty either. It was loneliness. I'll be in the kitchen, Sarah said quietly. She kissed Jason's forehead and walked out, glancing back one last time before closing the door. Now it was just Victor and Jason. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. Jason sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, looking like he was waiting for instructions. Victor studied him. You're scared of me. A little, Jason admitted. Good. You should be. I'm not a nice man. Mama says everyone's got good in them. You just gotta look hard sometimes. Victor's eyebrow lifted. Your mother's an optimist. What's that? Someone who believes in things that aren't real. Jason frowned. Like Santa. Victor almost smiled. Almost. Yeah. Like Santa. Jason thought about this. Then he said, I don't believe in Santa anymore. But I still believe in good people. Victor leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Why? Because my dad was good. And he was real. The words hit Victor like a slap. He sat back, his jaw tight. Your father died. Yes, sir. And your mother's struggling. Yes, sir. So where's the goodness in that? Jason looked down at his hands. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then quietly he said, I don't know. But Mama says God's got a plan. Even when it hurts. Victor stared at the boy. And for the first time in 20 years, he didn't have a comeback. Didn't have a cynical remark. He just sat there, looking at this kid who'd lost everything and still believed the world wasn't broken. Tell me about your dad, Victor said finally. Jason's face lit up just a little. He was strong. He worked at the factory. He used to come home with grease on his hands, and Mama would yell at him for messing up the towels. Jason smiled at the memory. But he'd just laugh. He laughed a lot. What else? He used to take me to the park. We'd race cars on the sidewalk. He always let me win. Jason's smile faded. Then one day he didn't come home. Victor's throat tightened. Mama cried for a long time, Jason continued. I tried to be good so she wouldn't be sad. But she still cried. And you? Victor asked. Did you cry? Jason nodded. Every night. But I don't tell Mama. I don't want her to feel bad. Victor looked away. He didn't trust himself to speak. Because in that moment, this 7-year-old boy, this kid with nothing, was braver than Victor had ever been. And it terrified him. The Saturdays became a routine. Every week, Sarah would bring Jason to the mansion. Every week, Victor would sit in that same leather chair, and Jason would sit across from him. And every week, Victor would try to crack the boy. He tested him in small ways at first. He'd leave money on the table again. Jason never touched it. He'd accidentally drop his wallet. Jason would pick it up and hand it back. He'd pretend to be asleep with valuables nearby. Jason would cover him with a blanket and sit quietly until he woke up. It was maddening. Victor couldn't understand it. He'd spent decades watching people lie, cheat, and steal. He'd seen business partners betray him for a bigger payday. He'd watched his own children grow into greedy, entitled adults who only called when they wanted something. But this kid? This poor, hungry 7-year-old kid with holes in his shoes and a dead father? He was good. Not perfect. Not angelic. Just good. And it was driving Victor insane. One Saturday, Victor decided to push harder. He set up a new test. This time, he didn't just leave money. He left Jason's toy car, the one his father had given him, sitting on a high shelf. Out of reach. Next to it, Victor placed a small step stool. Then he told Jason he needed to make a phone call, and left the room. But Victor didn't leave. He stood just outside the door, watching through the crack. Jason noticed the car immediately. His face lit up. He walked over to the shelf, staring up at it. The car was too high for him to reach, even on his tiptoes. Victor watched, waiting. The step stool was right there. All Jason had to do was climb up and take it. But Jason didn't. Instead, he stood there for a long moment, hands at his sides. Then he turned and walked back to his chair. He sat down and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Jason didn't move. Didn't try to climb. Didn't even ask for help. Finally, Victor came back into the room, pretending like nothing had happened. Everything okay? Victor asked. Yes, sir, Jason said. Victor glanced at the shelf. The car was still there. Untouched. You didn't want your car back? Jason looked at the shelf, then at Victor. You put it up there. I figured you didn't want me to have it yet. Victor's chest tightened. And if I never gave it back? Jason's face fell, but he didn't argue. Then I guess it wasn't mine anymore. Victor walked to the shelf, grabbed the car, and turned it over in his hands. Then he looked at Jason, really looked at him, and saw something that made his heart ache. The boy wasn't trying to impress him. Wasn't putting on a show. He was just being. Why do you do that? Victor asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Do what? Trust people. Even when they don't deserve it. Jason thought about this. Then he said, because my dad used to say trust is a gift. You give it first. And if someone breaks it, that's on them. Not you. Victor felt something crack inside him. Not the wall around his heart. Something deeper. Something older. He handed the car back to Jason. Keep it. It's yours. Jason took it carefully, like it was made of glass. Thank you, Mr. Victor. Victor sat back down, suddenly exhausted. He rubbed his face with both hands, feeling every one of his 75 years. Your dad sounds like he was a good man. He was the best. And you want to be like him? Yes, sir. Victor looked at the fire, the flames dancing and twisting. What if I told you being good doesn't get you anywhere? What if I told you the world chews up people like your dad and spits them out? Jason didn't flinch. Then I'd say my dad still mattered. Because he mattered to me and Mama. And that's enough. Victor's throat closed up. He turned away so Jason wouldn't see his face. Because for the first time in 20 years, Victor Larson felt something he thought he'd buried forever. Hope. It was the 8th Saturday. Victor sat in his chair, staring at the boy across from him, and realized something that made his stomach turn. He cared. Not in some distant, transactional way. Not because Jason was useful or entertaining. But because somewhere along the way, this kid had wormed his way into Victor's cold, dead heart and made it beat again. And Victor hated it. Because caring meant risk. Caring meant vulnerability. Caring meant opening yourself up to the one thing Victor had sworn he'd never feel again. Loss. Jason, Victor said, his voice tight. I need to tell you something. Jason looked up, curious. Okay. Victor leaned forward, hands clasped so tight his knuckles turned white. I've been testing you. Every week. Every moment we've spent together. I've been waiting for you to mess up. To show me you're just like everyone else. Jason frowned. I know. Victor blinked. You know? Yes, sir. Mama told me you don't trust people. So I figured you were checking to see if I was bad. Victor sat back, stunned. And you still came back? You were paying Mama. We needed the money. So you were just playing along? Pretending to be good so I'd keep paying. Jason shook his head. No, sir. I wasn't pretending. I just am. I don't know how to be anything else. Victor's jaw clenched. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to Jason. His hands were shaking. You don't understand, Victor said, his voice raw. People aren't like you. People lie. People take. People hurt you when you're not looking. He turned around, and for the first time, Jason saw tears in the old man's eyes. My own children are waiting for me to die so they can split up my money. My business partners would sell me out for a better deal. Everyone I've ever trusted has stabbed me in the back. I'm sorry, Jason said quietly. Don't be sorry. Victor snapped. Then softer, don't be sorry. It's not your fault. Jason stood and walked over to Victor. He was so small next to the towering old man. But he reached out and took Victor's hand. My dad used to say hurting people hurt people, Jason said. Maybe the people who hurt you were hurting too. Victor looked down at the small hand holding his. And something inside him shattered. He sank to his knees, right there in front of the window, and covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Victor Larson, billionaire, cynic, man of steel, was crying. Jason didn't pull away. He just stood there, holding the old man's hand, waiting. I'm sorry, Victor choked out. I'm so sorry. For what? For testing you. For not believing you. For thinking you were like everyone else. Jason squeezed his hand. It's okay, Mr. Victor. You believe me now, right? Victor looked up, tears streaming down his weathered face. Yes. God help me, I do. Jason smiled. Then that's all that matters. Victor pulled the boy into a hug, tight, desperate, like he was holding on to the last good thing in the world. And Jason hugged him back. For a long time, they stayed like that. An old man and a little boy. Two broken people holding each other together. When Victor finally pulled back, He wiped his face roughly and cleared his throat. I need to do something. What? Victor stood and walked to his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. He sat down and started writing. Jason watched, confused. What are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago. Victor wrote for several minutes, his hand moving quickly across the page. When he was finished, he folded the paper, put it in an envelope, and sealed it. Then he wrote a name on the front. Jason. He looked at the boy. When I die, and I will sooner than later, this is for you. Don't open it until then. Promise me. Jason's eyes went wide. Mr. Victor, don't talk like that. Promise me, Jason. I promise. Victor handed him the envelope. Good. Now go find your mother. Tell her we're done for today. Jason hesitated. Are you okay? Victor smiled. It was small, fragile, but it was real. I will be. Jason ran out of the room, clutching the envelope. Victor sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. For the first time in 20 years, he felt peace. Maybe you've been hurt before. Maybe you've built walls so high nobody can climb them. Maybe you've stopped believing people can be good without wanting something in return. If that's you, don't look away now. Because what happens next is for you. This story isn't just about a billionaire and a boy. It's about all of us learning to trust again. Stay with me. 2 months later, Victor Larson died. It was peaceful. He went to sleep in his favorite chair and didn't wake up. The housekeeper found him the next morning, hands folded in his lap, face calm. Sarah got the call at 6 a.m. She dropped the phone and cried, not because she'd lost a job, but because somewhere along the way, Victor had become more than a boss. He'd become something close to family. Jason cried too. He cried for the old man who'd started as a stranger and ended as a friend. The funeral was held 3 days later. It was a cold, gray morning. The kind of day that feels like the world is mourning with you. The church was full, but not with people who loved Victor. It was full of business associates, distant relatives, and opportunists hoping to get a mention in the will. Victor's children sat in the front row. 3 of them. All adults. All dressed in expensive black. All with the same cold, calculating eyes their father once had. Sarah and Jason sat in the back. They didn't belong in the front. They weren't family. They were just the maid and her son. But when the service ended and people started filing out, a lawyer approached them. Sarah Martinez? The man asked. Yes. I'm Gerald Whitman, Mr. Larson's attorney. He left instructions for you and your son to attend the reading of the will. It's in 1 hour. At the estate. Sarah's heart sank. Sir, we're not family. We don't need to be there. He specifically requested you. The lawyer's face was unreadable. Please. It's important. An hour later, Sarah and Jason sat in Victor's library, the same room where everything had started. The lawyer stood at the front, a thick document in his hands. Victor's children sat across from them, glaring. Why are they here? One of the sons asked, nodding toward Sarah and Jason with disgust. They're here because your father wanted them here, Whitman said coolly. Now, if we're ready, I'll begin. He opened the will and started reading. The first few items were standard. Properties were divided among charities. Investments were liquidated. Smaller assets were given to distant relatives. Then Whitman paused. He looked up at the room, his expression serious. And now we come to the primary estate. The mansion, the remaining businesses, and all liquid assets totaling approximately $43 million. The children leaned forward. This was what they'd been waiting for. Whitman cleared his throat. Victor Larson leaves the entirety of his primary estate to Jason Martinez, son of Sarah Martinez, with the condition that Sarah act as trustee until Jason reaches the age of 25. The room exploded. What? That's impossible. He's not even family. The children were on their feet, shouting, faces red with rage. Sarah sat frozen, unable to process what she'd just heard. Jason looked up at his mom, terrified and confused. There must be a mistake, one of the daughters screamed. Our father wouldn't leave everything to some random kid. There's no mistake, Whitman said calmly. I have the signed and notarized document right here, witnessed by 3 independent parties. This is fraud, the eldest son snarled. That woman manipulated him. She's a gold digger who... Enough. Whitman's voice cut through the room like a blade. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another envelope. Your father anticipated this reaction. He left a letter. Would you like me to read it, or would you prefer to continue shouting? The children went silent. Fuming, but silent. Whitman opened the envelope and began to read. To my children. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if you're angry, I'm not surprised. You've spent your whole lives waiting for me to die so you could cash in. I don't blame you. I taught you to think that way. I raised you to believe money was the only thing that mattered. I was wrong. 8 months ago, a boy named Jason walked into my life. He had nothing. His father was dead. His mother was scraping by. And when I gave him a chance to steal from me, he didn't take it. Instead, he gave me his jacket because he thought I was cold. That moment broke me. I spent the last months of my life getting to know that boy. And he taught me something I'd forgotten. Kindness isn't a transaction. Love isn't a strategy. Goodness is real. And it's worth more than anything I've built. So I'm leaving everything to Jason. Not because I don't love you, but because I want you to understand what I finally learned. Wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in character. And that boy has more character in his little finger than I had in my entire life. If you're angry, good. Be angry. Then go out and earn something on your own. Maybe you'll learn what real wealth is. If you're reading this, Jason, know that you gave an old bitter man a reason to believe again. Use this money wisely. Help people. Be the man your father raised you to be. And for God's sake, don't turn out like me. Victor Larson. The room was dead silent. Victor's children stared at the floor. Some looked angry. Some looked ashamed. One of them was crying. Sarah was crying too. She pulled Jason close and held him tight, overwhelmed. Jason looked up at her. Mama, what does this mean? Sarah kissed his forehead. It means Mr. Victor loved you, baby. And he wanted to make sure you'd be okay. The lawyer closed the will and looked at the children. You have the right to contest this. But I'll warn you now, your father made sure this was airtight. You won't win. Victor's eldest son stood slowly. He looked at Jason for a long moment. Then, without a word, he walked out. One by one, the others followed. And Jason, the boy who had nothing, inherited everything. The weeks after the will reading were a blur. Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking it was a dream, that someone would knock on her door and say there'd been a mistake. But the lawyers kept calling. Papers kept coming. And slowly, the reality sank in. Jason was rich. Not just comfortable. Not just secure. Rich. $43 million rich. Mansion on the hill rich. Never have to work again rich. And Sarah had no idea what to do with that. She was terrified. Terrified of the money. Terrified of the responsibility. Terrified that this would change Jason into someone she didn't recognize. But Jason? He didn't change. He still woke up early. Still said his prayers before bed. Still asked if they could donate his old toys to kids who needed them more. Mama, he said one night as she tucked him in. Can we still live in our apartment? Sarah smiled sadly. Baby, we don't have to anymore. We can live anywhere now. But I like our apartment. It's where Daddy's stuff is. Sarah's throat tightened. She kissed his forehead. Okay, we'll stay. And Mama? Yeah. Can we use some of the money to help people? Like Mr. Victor said. Sarah pulled him close. Yeah, baby. We can do that. Jason fell asleep that night with his father's toy car clutched in his hand and Victor's letter under his pillow. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. She called the lawyer. Mr. Whitman, I need your help setting something up. Of course. What do you need? A foundation. I want to use part of Jason's inheritance to help single parents. Families like us. People who are struggling to keep the lights on. There was a pause. Then Whitman's voice came back, warm and approving. Mrs. Martinez, I think Victor would have loved that. 3 months later, the Larson Foundation was born. It started small. Scholarships for kids who'd lost parents. Grants for single moms trying to go back to school. Assistance for families facing eviction. But word spread. Fast. People started reaching out, hundreds of them, then thousands, all with stories just like Sarah's. And every time Sarah read a letter or met a family, she thought of Victor. He'd spent his whole life building walls. And with one act of faith, he'd torn them all down. Jason helped too. He was only 7, but he understood what they were doing. He'd sit with Sarah while she read applications, and sometimes he'd point to one and say, "Mama, this one. They need help." And Sarah would smile and say, "Okay, baby. We'll help them." One day, a reporter came to interview them. She was young, eager, holding a recorder like it was the Holy Grail. "Mrs. Martinez, people are calling your son the billionaire's heir. How does that make you feel?" Sarah looked at Jason, who was sitting on the floor playing with his toy car. "He's not a billionaire's heir. He's my son. And he's his father's son. The money doesn't change that. But it does change your life. It gave us options. But it didn't change who we are." Sarah paused. Victor didn't leave Jason money because he wanted him to be rich. He left it because he wanted him to do something good with it. And that's what we're trying to do. The reporter smiled. "One more question. What would you say to Victor if he were here?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I'd say thank you. Not for the money. But for seeing my son. For believing in him. For letting him remind you what goodness looks like." The interview aired 2 weeks later. And the foundation's applications tripled overnight. Jason watched the interview with his mom, curled up on the couch. "Mama," he said quietly. "Yeah, baby. Do you think Mr. Victor's in heaven?" Sarah kissed the top of his head. "I think he's finally at peace." Jason nodded. Then he whispered, "I miss him." "Me too, baby. Me too." 2 years passed. Jason turned 9. The foundation grew. Sarah went back to school and got her degree in social work. Life was different now. Bigger. Fuller. But they never forgot where they came from. Every year on the anniversary of Victor's death, Sarah and Jason visited his grave. It was a simple headstone. No fancy words. Just his name, his dates, and one line. He learned to believe again. Jason would sit by the grave and talk to Victor like he was still there. He'd tell him about school. About the families they'd helped. About the new playground they'd built in their old neighborhood. And every time, Sarah would watch her son and think about how one moment, one act of kindness in a cold library, had changed everything. But there was something Sarah didn't know. Something Victor had left behind that even the lawyers didn't know about. It started with a phone call. "Mrs. Martinez? This is Calvin Ross. I was Victor Larson's private banker for 30 years. Sarah frowned. "Okay. I'm calling because there's a safety deposit box registered under your son's name. It was set to be opened on his 9th birthday. That's today, isn't it?" Sarah's heart skipped. "Yes." Mr. Larson left instructions. "You and Jason need to come to the bank. Today." 2 hours later, Sarah and Jason stood in a small cold room at the bank. Mr. Ross handed Jason a key. "Box 217, he said. "It's yours." Jason looked at his mom. She nodded. He slid the key into the lock and turned it. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a single envelope. On the front, in Victor's handwriting, it said, "For Jason. When you're ready." Jason opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. He read it out loud. "Jason, if you're reading this, you're 9 years old. Old enough to start understanding what I'm about to tell you. I didn't leave you my money because I felt sorry for you. I didn't leave it to you because I wanted to punish my children, though they deserved it. I left it to you because you saved my life. Not literally, but in every way that matters. I was a dying man long before my heart stopped. I was angry, bitter, and alone. I believed the world was rotten. That people were selfish. That love was a lie. And then you covered me with your jacket. That one moment, So small, so simple, cracked something open inside me. You didn't want anything from me. You didn't know who I was or what I had. You just saw an old man who looked cold, and you cared. You gave me hope, Jason. You reminded me that goodness is real. And you made my last months on earth mean something. So here's what I want you to know. Don't waste this gift. Use the money. Build something beautiful. Help people the way you helped me. But more than that, stay who you are. The world will try to change you. It'll tell you that money makes you better than others. That power is the goal. That you have to step on people to get ahead. Don't believe it. Your father raised you right. Your mother raised you strong. And somewhere up there, I like to think we're both watching over you. Be good, Jason. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Love, Victor. P.S. I left you one more thing. Check the bottom of the box. Jason reached into the box again. At the bottom was a small velvet pouch. He opened it. Inside was a pocket watch. Old. Gold. Engraved on the back were the words, "Time is the only thing you can't buy. Spend it wisely." Jason held the watch in his small hands, tears streaming down his face. Sarah knelt beside him and pulled him close. "He loved you, baby," she whispered. "He really, really loved you." Jason nodded, unable to speak. Mr. Ross, standing quietly in the corner, cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Mr. Larson set up a second trust. It's separate from the inheritance. It's specifically for your education and future endeavors. It unlocks when you turn 18. Sarah looked up. "How much?" 10 million. Sarah's breath caught. Victor hadn't just given Jason a fortune. He'd given him a future. Jason wiped his eyes and looked up at his mom. "Mama, I want to make him proud." Sarah cupped his face in her hands. "Baby, you already have." They left the bank that day with the watch, the letter, and a renewed sense of purpose. Victor's legacy wasn't just money. It was the reminder that one person's kindness can change the world. Jason turned 18 on a sunny spring morning. He woke up in the apartment, yes, the same apartment, looked at his father's toy car on the shelf, and felt the weight of the pocket watch in his hand. Today was the day the second trust unlocked. $10 million. He'd known it was coming. Had spent the last 9 years preparing for it. Sarah made sure he stayed grounded. Made sure he understood what money could do, and what it couldn't do. He graduated top of his class. Got a full scholarship to Georgetown. Studied business and social work. And every step of the way, he carried Victor's letter in his wallet. The foundation had grown too. It wasn't just local anymore. It was national. They'd helped thousands of families. Built community centers. Funded scholarships. Created job training programs. And Jason had been a part of all of it. But now, as he sat in the lawyer's office for the final time, Jason realized something. This wasn't the end of Victor's story. It was the beginning of his own. Mr. Whitman slid the papers across the desk. "Sign here, and the funds are yours. No restrictions. You can do whatever you want with them." Jason picked up the pen. Then he paused. "Mr. Whitman, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did Victor ever talk about me? I mean, before he died. Did he ever say why he really did this?" Whitman leaned back in his chair, a soft smile on his face. "He did. Once. About a week before he passed." "What did he say?" "He said, 'That boy taught me something I spent 75 years trying to avoid. He taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the only strength that lasts.'" Whitman's eyes glistened. "And then he said, 'I just hope he knows how much he mattered.'" Jason's throat tightened. He nodded, unable to speak. He signed the papers. That afternoon, Jason stood in front of the foundation's board of directors, Sarah, Mr. Whitman, and a few trusted advisors. "I've made a decision," Jason said. "I'm putting 8 million of the trust into the foundation. The rest, I'm using to start a new program." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of program?" Jason smiled. "A mentorship program. Pairing kids who've lost parents with older adults who've lost their families. People who are lonely. People who need purpose." He paused. People like Victor. The room went silent. Then Sarah stood and pulled her son into a hug. Your father would be so proud of you. Both of them. Jason held her tight. I learned from the best. 6 months later, the program launched. They called it Second Chances. And the first participant was a 72-year-old retired teacher named Margaret. She'd lost her husband 5 years ago. Her kids lived across the country. She spent most days alone. She was paired with a 10-year-old boy named Marcus. His mom had died of cancer. His dad was doing his best but working 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. Margaret and Marcus met once a week. They'd bake cookies, read books, talk about life. And slowly, both of them healed. Jason watched it all unfold and thought about Victor. About how one broken man and one innocent boy had started a chain reaction that was still going. One evening, Jason visited Victor's grave. He hadn't been in a while. Life had gotten busy. He sat down on the grass and pulled out the pocket watch. Hey Victor, he said quietly. I know it's been a minute, but I wanted to tell you something. He paused, looking at the headstone. You were wrong about one thing. You said people are selfish. That everyone's got an angle. But you proved yourself wrong. You gave everything to a kid you barely knew because you believed in him. That's not selfish. That's love. Jason smiled. And I'm gonna spend the rest of my life proving you right. Proving that goodness is real. That people can change. That one moment of kindness can ripple out forever. He stood and placed a single white flower on the grave. Thank you, Victor. For everything. As Jason walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the cemetery. And for a moment, just a moment, Jason could have sworn he heard Victor's voice on the wind. You did good, kid. You did real good. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the people in your life who believed in you when no one else did, then don't let this moment pass. This isn't just a story. It's a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life with a single act of kindness. You've stayed with me this long. That means something. That means you still believe in goodness too. Hold on to that. The world needs more people like you. Jason's phone buzzed as he got into his car. Unknown number. He answered. Hello. Is this Jason Martinez? A woman's voice. Shaky. Desperate. Yes. Who's this? My name is Rebecca Larson. I'm Victor's daughter. Jason's heart stopped. He hadn't heard from any of Victor's children in 9 years. Not since the will reading. What do you want? He asked carefully. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, I want to apologize. And I need your help. It's about my father. There's something he never told anyone. Something that changes everything. Jason gripped the steering wheel. What are you talking about? Not over the phone. Can we meet? Jason's mind raced. Was this a trick? A trap? Or was this real? Please, Rebecca whispered. It's about why he really left you everything. And it's bigger than you think. Jason closed his eyes. Where and when?
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed the story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.